Did you ever think being a woman who wanted it all would be so hard? I didn't either. That's why my guest and I are unveiling the issues and challenging the norms of modern womanhood with the intention of exploring and publicly airing the uncomfortable and the unspoken. No topic is taboo as we search for answers to the questions that most people are too ashamed to ask. Welcome to Single at 30, the manual for the modern woman that we are writing together. So, are you in?
When I was single, all I wanted was for somebody to tell me, you're okay. You're more than okay. The status of your relationship situation does not define you. And you're doing the best that you can, and you're doing a really great job. Like that's all I ever wanted someone to say. And instead, you're bombarded with how to find a guy, all the things you're doing wrong on a first date, what rules to follow, and so many damaging things that just keep telling you that you are supposed to be fixed as a single person.
Our guest today was an absolute delight to speak with. Not only has she had an unbelievably impressive career as a TV sports reporter who worked all across America, including New York, but she's a living example of how refusing to settle in life or give in to society's expectations can lead you to your very own version of happily ever after. Our guest has never followed a traditional path. Although she enjoyed over 16 years of success as an award-winning television journalist, she still couldn't help but feel like she was somehow behind. The traditional timeline for women told her that she should have been married with children by now, and she felt miles away from where she thought she'd be, making her question whether there was something wrong with her. While our guest story is unique, her experience is all too familiar for many women. It wasn't until she began to celebrate who she was, honor her accomplishments, and welcome a future all her own that she was able to step into the life she always dreamed of. She had her first boyfriend at 35, married at 38, started her own company at 39, and is now welcoming her first child at age 41. By embracing her own timeline, she was finally able to find happiness and peace with her own life path. Now our guest is on a mission to help other women avoid the same pitfalls, free themselves from expectations, and let them know they are not alone on this journey. She helps women stop worrying about what they think they should be doing with their life and start living it. As our guest likes to put it, there is a life you thought you would have, and there is your life actually. It's the actually that holds all the power and excitement. We just have to embrace it. Together in this episode, we discuss how to stop wishing and start living by embracing the life you have right now, in addition to how we can each own our individual timelines rather than chasing arbitrary milestones. Our guest also provides insight into some of the pressures she experienced while working in a male-dominated industry, as well as her IVF journey, and shares her wisdom on how to ignore the negative narratives surrounding being single and the expectation for women to couple up by a certain age, or subscribe to cringeworthy dating rules, and in doing so normalize the reality that there is no one way to be happy. I am so excited to introduce to you today the incredible Laura Behnke. So hello, Laura. Welcome to Single at 30, the manual for the modern woman.
Hi, Nicole. It is so nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
So let's start from the beginning. Where did you grow up and what was your upbringing like?
Yeah, so I'm currently in California, but I'm from the Midwest in the United States. I'm from Minnesota. For those of you who are not entirely familiar with the United States, it's right in the middle and right up against Canada. And my family life was great. I really was very privileged to have a supportive network around me. My parents were happily married. I have a younger brother, and my parents did a really great job of raising me to believe that I could do whatever I wanted, that my brother and I were equal. Whatever he could do, I could do. They didn't press any ideas of marriage or kids on either one of us, but especially on me as a girl. That wasn't what I had to do, which, was wonderful at the time, but then did also kind of lend itself to some of my feelings of being like, oh my gosh, I'm single way later than I thought I should be, because even though that's what my parents were telling me, they met when they were 20. They got married when they were in their early 20s, had me a few years after that. So while they told me all these great things, the visual that I had was a life that ended up looking so different from my own. But I really can't complain about the childhood that I have. I was very, very fortunate.
So you've had such a successful career as a television journalist. Did you always know that's what you wanted to do growing up?
No. So I actually thought I was going to be an actress.
I love that.
That was my goal. That was my goal. I was a total theater geek growing up. You could not get me off the stage. Like, I loved being in front of people. I loved talking, which is, I'm sure, so hard for you to understand because it takes me so long to come out of my shell. But I actually was a theater major my freshman year of college. And then I realized, I'm not quite sure I have the passion to always be looking for the next job. Because really, that's, as an actor, especially when you're first starting out, your job is finding a job. And I was like, I'm not so sure that's for me. So I did a pivot early on in my college career and decided journalism was definitely more my speed. I loved sports. I had never played sports, but I was always such a huge fan. And I was always, paying attention to what was going on and learning about it. And truth be told, when I was in high school, I had a huge crush on a guy who played on our football team. And that may have been what started my love of sports. But
finally, it all makes sense to me.
It all comes back to that. But I ran with it, and I absolutely loved the idea of being a woman trying to break into a very male-dominated world, to be able to have that challenge and to really try and make a name for myself when I knew it was going to be hard. And let me just say, I thought I was going the more stable route by doing TV over theater, and it was more stable by like a fractional amount. So I went from one crazy field to another, but it was wonderful. I had 16 years in TV, and I loved it at the time. It was exactly what I wanted to be doing, and it was never boring.
Right. So talk to me about the sort of expectations and pressures that came with working in a male-dominated industry as a female.
Oh, there were so many. And, I can look back now and I can really understand them better from a distance. But when I was in it, everything was so normalized to me. This idea that I had to prove myself every single time I opened my mouth because I was a woman. If I ever made a slight mistake or misspoke, which, let's be honest, we all do that every now and then. No one is
all
perfect.
The time on my end.
All the time. Yeah. Okay, good. I'm not alone. But being in that field, I lived in fear of making just a casual mistake because I was so worried that when I did, everybody around me would be like, oh, see, she doesn't know what she's talking about. She's a woman in sports. She doesn't know what she's talking about. And oh my goodness, there was so much pressure about how I was supposed to be a woman doing this job. Not to mention how I was supposed to look, how I was supposed to sound. I had this idea. And TV kind of has this idea of how you are supposed to present yourself and who you're supposed to be. So I feel like for 16 years, while I loved my career and while I loved what I did and was very proud of myself, I was showcasing a Laura that wasn't actually me. It was TV Laura. It was the Laura I thought I had to be in order to find success.
And how did you manage that? Like, was that hard day to day, or were you just in autopilot?
Yeah, I think autopilot is definitely a good way to characterize it. Also, a bit of ignorance is bliss. Like, it took to the end of my career for me to really kind of open my eyes and go, oh my gosh, maybe life doesn't have to be this way. Maybe you could actually share your voice in a meaningful way. Like maybe you can actually say how you feel. Because the thing with TV, at least here in the United States, when you sign on as a journalist and you sign your contract, you are signing away your name, your voice, your image, everything about you now is owned by the station that you work for.
Wow.
And so I couldn't have an opinion. I tried to start a fashion blog that was nothing. Yeah, it had nothing to do with sports. It was shut down in less than a week because they hadn't authorized it. It wasn't through the station. And it was, that was what really started to get me thinking, like, maybe this isn't the way it has to be. But, when you want something so badly and you're in a business that is so cutthroat and there are so few jobs compared to the number of people who want them, you convince yourself that you will do whatever it takes to keep moving up. And that's what I did.
And you moved all the way up to New York, is that right?
I did. I made it to New York. The last 7 years of my career was in New York City, which is the number one market in the United States. I was still doing local news. My dream had always been to work for a network and to go national, but New York was a pretty great place to be. So many teams that I covered, so many experiences that I had while I was there, and the other big thing about making a career pivot when you have had success, I kept thinking, I gave up so much of my life to get to this point. I have to keep doing it. Like, I can't just walk away.
Didn't want to give up.
Yeah. What were these last 16 years for? And so there's that feeling too. And then also, oh my gosh, I'm in my late 30s. Like, I can't start over. I can't be an intern and go get people coffee. And what would I even do? Like, I'm not qualified to do much other than talk about sports and do some writing. But it was
totally.
It was a weird time because you have invested so much of yourself and your life and everything in this one thing. And then you begin to come to the realization that maybe that one thing isn't serving you or isn't what you want to do anymore.
Totally. So let's talk about what you did next. You're now a women's empowerment coach and the founder and CEO of the Life Actually company. So how did you come up with the idea to start this company and what is it about?
Well, I would love to say that I left TV, I had this mission, and the next day I started it and I was on my way. But oh man, all I really knew was that I needed to get out of TV, that I needed to have a place where I could finally be myself. The idea that I could actually share an opinion for the first time in my adult life publicly was very cool, but also a little overwhelming because I didn't even know how to do that. I was so used to having to get permission to say pretty much anything.
Wow.
And I had no idea what to do. I had absolutely no idea. A big thing about TV is, at least the way it tends to work in the United States, is there's a system for how you work your way up. You start small, you start doing the grunt work, and then there's kind of a roadmap for how you build your way up and how you make it to that next job and then that next job until hopefully you end up, in your dream city or with your dream job. Well, I knew I wanted to go off on my own and do something for me that was by me, but there aren't roadmaps for that. And so
Definitely not.
I was like, wait a minute, nobody's here to tell me exactly what to do next.
Where's the manual?
Honestly, could somebody please write that? That would be
That's what we're trying to do here.
Yes, and I appreciate that so much. So I tried my hand in fashion blogging and influencing for a little bit, thinking, I've always loved fashion. I've always loved style. I love the idea of helping women find their own style and not just this, you have to do what's in the fashion magazines and what people who don't have a body type that looks like yours at all, but you still have to do what they're doing. And
totally.
I did not like that. I wanted it to be like an inclusive fashion experience and not have it even really be fashion, but more style, because style is so individualized. But as I did that for a few months and realized I wasn't very good at it and that there were so many other people who were so much better.
I love your honesty, by the way. I love that.
No, I wasn't good at it. I really wasn't. I didn't know how to do it. And I started to realize that I didn't really want to try and figure it out. So at this point, I got married shortly after leaving TV. I met my husband when I was 35, and I had never had a boyfriend up until the point when I met him at 35 and a half. And I always use the half because when you get to a certain age, you start measuring things like by the month.
It starts to matter.
It does. It totally does. No, I was not 35. I was 35 and a half. And I met my first boyfriend. And, all of those years of being single, I was in TV. And I was so terrified of people finding out that not only did I not have a relationship, but that I had never had a relationship, because we have so many views and ideas on what relationships say about people.
Oh, absolutely.
Unfortunately.
Yep.
And this idea that, if you haven't been in one or you aren't in one, well, what's wrong with you? And, clearly you're doing something wrong. I was already telling myself those things, and I did not need the rest of the world to pile on. So I kept that secret. I wanted to be, perfect TV Laura. I wanted the viewers to see me as this put together, totally with it, just, liked by everybody, reporter and anchor. And so I hid that side of me. It was my darkest secret, which I look back now and I'm like, oh, I just want to give that Laura a hug, because it's so not a bad thing. It's so not. And I was so terrified of it. So when I finally left TV and I finally realized that I had a voice of my own that I could use, I found that when I was talking to other women about finally sharing my experiences, just people that I would meet, friends of friends, and sharing my stories and having them say, oh my gosh, I can so relate to that. Even if I haven't had the exact same experience, hearing you talk about that, it gives me hope, because I know I'm not the only one who's ever felt this way. And so I started thinking about that and thinking, when I was single, all I wanted was for somebody to tell me, you're okay. You're more than okay. The status of your relationship situation does not define you. And you're doing the best that you can. And you're doing a really great job. That's all I ever wanted someone to say. And instead, you're bombarded with how to find a guy, all the things you're doing wrong on a first date, what rules to follow, and so many damaging things that just keep telling you that you are supposed to be fixed as a single person. So I decided on this fashion blog that I was going to write about my experiences when I was single, not to tell anybody what to do or how to fix it or anything like that, but just to share the experiences that I had. And I hit publish on that first introduction article. And in that post, I say publicly on the internet that I met my husband at 35 and a half, and he was my first ever relationship. And I was terrified.
Did it go viral? Did the post go viral?
No, I wish it would have. No, it didn't. And that's the thing. I didn't have a ton of people who were reading my blog at that time. And this is how I knew that I was onto something, because, I hit publish on it and was just, sweating and okay, it's out there. I can delete it, but it was still out there. So it's out there forever.
It's got a digital footprint.
Exactly. But also I was like, but nobody really reads this. You have a very small readership, so maybe nobody's actually even going to see it. But by the end of the day, I had 3 different women. And for me, that was big, because I was never getting any, actual emails from people after they had read anything I posted. But 3 different women, 1 who I kind of knew and 2 who were complete strangers, all sent me emails saying, oh my gosh, I have never had a relationship, and I thought I was the only one. And they ranged in age from their early 30s up to 40. And the message was, thank you. Thank you for sharing that this is what you experienced, because I'm going through it too. And that's when the seeds started to get planted that, maybe there's something bigger here that I can tap into, that I can connect with, women on a deeper level. And that's when I really started to understand just how little support not only did I receive when I was single, but that it is out there for single women in general, and that's just not okay. And I'm so tired of people being defined by their relationship status. And at this point, I had gotten married, and so I'm like, so wait, so now that I'm married, does this mean that I'm on some different level? Because I'm not at all.
You've arrived.
My life,
you're married.
Yeah, everything is perfect now. My life is just a fairy tale. Spoiler alert. Not the way it goes. And so, I just started realizing how much from being single to these ideas of when you're supposed to have kids, to the idea of, when your career is supposed to be figured out, all of these pressures that we feel, especially as women, from society about a timeline and when we're supposed to do everything. And I just rejected it. I just hated that because we didn't do things a set way, that is now dictating our idea of our own success.
That we've somehow failed, right?
Exactly. You've failed. And there are so many ways to have success in your life. And when we don't hit one, like, I didn't get married by 30, I am a failure. It makes me so angry that these are the messages that we are internalizing every day, and that it is setting the stage for what we think we should be doing and how our life should be going.
Totally.
So this is a very long-winded answer that I'm giving to your question.
I love it.
But, as I started realizing all of that, I was like, I think there's something here. And my first goal was to do a podcast where I would just talk to women about their stories, because the thing I realized about my childhood was, while my parents, like I had mentioned, had told me I could do whatever I wanted in my life, the visual that I had was get married in your early 20s, have kids by the time you're 30, and just the rest figures itself out. So when I hit my early 30s and was still single, yet had a pretty successful career in TV, I felt like a complete failure, because there wasn't anyone in my life, any women in my life, who had a life that looked like mine. So it made me feel like I was failing. And all of my girlfriends who were single too felt the same way. So it wasn't even like we could look to each other and be like, but you're doing a great job. It was always, so have you heard from the guy you went out with last week?
Totally.
So this idea that we, by sharing our stories with each other, that we're helping others see and have a visual of all these different ways life can go, which then helps you start to feel a little bit better about your own, perhaps untraditional path.
And realize you're not alone, right?
Yeah, exactly. Just realizing you're not alone is so huge. So I had that idea for the podcast. And from that podcast, which didn't actually launch until 2 years later, the company came from that. And the company came first, the Life Actually company. And
let's talk about your hashtag, which I love so much. It's #OwnYourTimeline. So is this essentially your entire story? Is that how you came up with the meaning behind the hashtag?
Yeah, it really is. And actually, one of the women in my community, she's the one who coined it. Emily, if you are listening, thank you. She coined it, and she said, because I talked about timelines and how timelines are so silly, and we hold ourselves to these like arbitrary ages and dates and things that are supposed to happen. And yeah, one of the women who I'm connected with was like, yeah, well, you need to just own your timeline. I was like, that's it. That's exactly what we need to do. And realizing that the things that we are judging ourselves on, the things that we are finding as failures, the things that we're worrying about in the way that our timeline looks, is actually what makes our timeline so unique and so amazing. Like it is ours. So instead of like apologizing for, I'm not married yet, or I haven't figured out my career yet, or I don't have the kids and the picket fence and the house, and instead of looking at it that way, saying, wait, what are all the things I have done? What does my timeline actually look like? What are the milestones that I have hit? And let's celebrate those.
We never celebrate them enough, honestly.
We don't.
We're always just putting ourselves
don't.
down for not having achieved enough by a certain point.
Exactly. And we have these ideas of the things that we're allowed to celebrate. We're allowed to celebrate engagements. We're allowed to celebrate weddings. I mean, we buy everyone gifts for all of these things. Where's my gift for buying a house by myself? or buying a car by myself, or moving across the country, or moving, miles and miles away from home.
I'm still waiting for my presents for when I got my cat, Laura, honestly.
Oh, congratulations, Nicole.
Like no one celebrated my fur baby.
Well, I want to celebrate your fur baby. That is important and amazing. And no, you're right. We don't. And I had a woman who was on my podcast a few weeks ago, and she was talking about how she got in her early 30s, got out of a toxic relationship. And she was like, at that point, people were like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so, you thought you were going to marry him. I'm so sorry. And she's like, I got out of a toxic relationship. Like,
yeah,
I made that choice for me.
Congratulations on your breakup.
Can we celebrate that? Exactly. She's like, where was the wine and the balloons and the flowers to celebrate that? So yeah, so it's looking at our own timeline. It's looking at what we have done and not feeling like we have to explain it, and instead just owning it. This is who we are. This is what we've done. Who knows what's ahead?
Realistically, no one does.
Exactly. So let's be open to it. And in the meantime, let's start honoring the things that we have accomplished.
Absolutely. So let's discuss your timeline, because I love how you were saying before you thought that you would get married and then have kids by 30 and then everything would just sort itself out after that. And I feel like that's so relatable. No one ever really thinks about what happens once you turn 30. They're just like, oh,
right?
I'll have my entire life sorted by 30 and then the rest is history. What did you think your life would look like by the time you turn 30? And I guess what actually happened then?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I never dated when I was growing up. When I was in high school, before going off to university, I didn't really date. So I don't know why I thought it would change. But I always did. And then even when I was in college, I didn't date really at all in college and didn't have any relationships. And yet I always told myself, when I was in high school, it was like, oh, in college, it'll be different. When I was in college, it was like, oh, these college guys are so immature. It'll be so different when you're in the real world and you're an adult.
Definitely not.
It wasn't for me. But I truly I knew I needed to focus on my career. I knew that a career was very important to me and that mattered. But I also had this unwritten or kind of spoken belief in my head about getting married and having kids. And I never specifically told myself, well, you have to do this by 30. I think it was just implied that that's what would happen, that I would get married, I would have the kids, all of that would be great. And then my life would really start. And yet when I thought ahead to my life after the kids part, it was kind of a blank. Like, I didn't know what was would I stay at home and be a stay-at-home mom? Would I keep working? How would I balance these things? Would I still be trying to be a network TV reporter? I didn't know. All I knew in my head was that I would get married and have kids, and the rest would sort itself out. So yeah, I had a plan with no plan at the exact same time.
I love that. I definitely relate.
And then, of course, none of it happened.
Exactly.
So I spent my 20s basically working my way up in the TV world, which meant moving cities every couple of years, and not just, moving, doing little moves. I moved coast to coast in the US twice, and was just bouncing all over the place, which made it difficult enough to maintain friendships, let alone actually creating relationships. And as a woman, I was always told by people who are older than me and in the business that it was going to be a lot harder for me to find a partner and a relationship as a woman because he was going to have to keep moving with me. Meanwhile,
totally. I get told that all the time, that it's women who have to compromise because men are less likely to be willing to do that. I hear that all the time.
And I'd look over at my male colleagues, and all of my male colleagues who were my age, who were married, were having kids. And I'm like, wait, why does he get to do this and I don't?
Yep.
So there was that, there was that whole idea that was based in reality, but then also based in just what everybody kind of thought was reality. So I got to New York when I was it was just after my 31st birthday. And so here I am, I'm living in my dream city. I'm in an apartment that overlooked Central Park. I had no business having an apartment this cool. And my cat and I were living large.
You had a cat as well? I love that.
I did. I had this great life in pretty much every area except my relationship status. And so turning 30 didn't bother me. Turning 35 really sent me over the edge. I think because I hit 35 and suddenly I was like, oh, I'm now closer to 40 than 30. And I'm still nowhere close to where I thought I would be in my personal life. And that was rough. That was really rough. I beat myself up so much after turning 35. And I just got really scared. I got really scared about what my life was supposed to turn into without a partner, and what was wrong with me that I didn't have a partner. And, and like I said, there just weren't a ton of resources out there to support single women in the way that I believe they should be supported, which is by being told there's nothing wrong with them. And so, yeah, I had kind of a rock bottom moment after turning 35, and I got myself out of it by taking myself on a vacation. It was middle of winter in New York City. It was snowy and cold and gross. I was like, I have to get out of here. But, all of my friends were married or had relationships or had very weird work schedules. TV is very strange when it comes to work schedules. And nobody could go with me. So I was like, well, I'm going to go by myself. So I went to Mexico by myself. And
I love that.
I had traveled before. I'd traveled before by myself, but that was a few years prior. And I enjoyed that trip, but that trip was very much rooted in, I can't believe I'm here by myself. I mean, I'm glad I'm here, but I'm here by myself because I don't have a boyfriend. Like, that was the narrative I kept telling myself in my head. And instead, this time it was like, I'm going on a vacation that I get to plan, that I get to call the shots on, that I get to do whatever I want. And it ended up being one of the best trips that I have ever had. It was really when I started to give myself permission to find joys in being by myself, in being single. And I came home from that trip and kind of kept that momentum going. What I really began to understand was that I had this plan in my head. I had this idea of how my life was supposed to go. So when I daydreamed about my future, when I daydreamed about 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, it always involved a husband and kids. The other details, they were interchangeable, but those two things were always there. So when I actually looked at the life I was leading, which was, no boyfriend, not really dating anybody, I had no future. The future I was giving myself was blank because he hadn't come into my life yet. So no wonder I was terrified. I was sitting here looking at the life that I had built, and if it continued on the way it was with the things that I could control, I just had a black hole in front of me. That was my future. So yeah, of course I was terrified. And what I was able to finally do was to kind of like lift that curtain and say, what can you control? Like, what kind of a life can you actually make for yourself that is yours, that has nothing to do with a partner? And let's actually start exploring what that could look like. And I still wanted to meet somebody. I still wanted that part of my life to happen very badly. But for the first time in my adult life, I gave myself permission to have hope for a life that I could actually have some control over, and gave myself permission to get excited about it. And that was a huge turning point for me. I think it was really the first time that I settled into being single and was okay with it. I had been on dating websites and I was like, I'm done. None of this is working. This isn't making me happy. I think I want to explore more this whole idea of like what I can create and what I can control. And of course, 6 weeks later is when I actually met my husband, which I love that part of my story because it is my story, but I also don't love it because I hate the idea that you have to fix something about yourself and you have to get into this perfect mindset and then love will happen. And that's just the way it goes. Like, it doesn't always go that way, but I had also set myself up to be in a place in my life where I was happy and content and really okay with whatever the future could bring. So when I did actually meet my husband, I truly feel like he is the first man who actually met me instead of the me who was desperately trying to make a relationship work so that I wouldn't end up alone.
I love that. You just stopped trying to search for love and you just were like expressing yourself, and in turn you attracted the right person for you.
Yeah. And I think timing is so important. I hated hearing about timing when I was single. I hated it because I always felt like, well, that's not fair. Like, why can't the timing just work out now? Like, that's just not fair. But, there's so many elements to that. Like, had we met 6 months prior when I was really, really in a difficult place, I don't know. I don't know what would have happened.
You probably would have walked straight past him.
Yeah. Or he would have been like, ooh, okay, I'm not sure I'm ready for this. Because I was angry. I was very angry for a long time because I was single and I didn't know why.
But I love how you said settle into being single. It's just like that saying, the second you stop searching for love, love finds you, and your story is kind of like evidence of that.
That's such a hard thing to hear when you're single, though, too. So you're like, oh, wait, how am I just supposed to stop looking? Because I want this so badly. And so it's a hard thing to hear when you are single. There are definitely elements of truth to it. I felt like for me, I was just getting to this point where I was being comfortable being single, and I was happy about it. I was excited about it. I actually almost broke things off with my husband right around our third date, which had nothing to do with him. He loves when I tell this story, by the way. Had nothing to do with him. I just remember he was doing everything right. I mean, I knew from the very beginning he was different. How
did you treating me. I'm always curious. How do you know?
Well, okay, so one of the things about New York, and I'm sure it's not just New York, I'm sure there's lots of cities like this, or just guys in general. But New York tends to have a lot of serial daters, men.
I've heard this.
It's almost like they do it for sport. I don't know what their end game is, because it's not even like the end result is always like sleeping with somebody. It's a very strange thing. So I went out on a few dates in New York where I came home and thought, that was the best first date I've ever had. That guy was... Oh, he is I'm marrying him. That could not have gone better. We clicked perfectly. He's good looking. I'm attracted to him. We mesh like, oh my gosh, best date ever. And then without fail, I would never hear from them again. And I'm like, wait,
sorry.
What the hell?
How is that possible?
How could I think this went so well? And in reality, what was happening was he was, I don't know, playing a game. Who knows? He was like listening to everything that I was putting out there about what I wanted, and that he was giving it back to me. He was purposely trying to win me over and like get me to this point where I was just totally sold. And then he was done. Lost interest. He moved on.
It's a little bit twisted, though.
It's so twisted. Oh, don't get me started about New York dating. We could do a whole episode on that.
Can we please? Because it's always been a dream of mine to move to New York, but now I'm scared.
Yeah, the dating scene is hard. It is. Oh my gosh, that it is. So when I met my husband, I went into the date, first of all, feeling very differently. Every other first date that I had gone on, I went into it thinking, okay, please have this guy be good. Please have this work out. Because I was always telling myself, if this doesn't work out, I don't know when the next date is that you'll have. Because it wasn't like I was having dates, every night of the week. So I went into these first dates thinking, oh, just please work out, please work out. And instead for this one, I was like, I'm actually feeling really good. I didn't necessarily want to meet anybody right now, but, why not? He has a British accent and I can drink a glass of wine, and listen to him talk.
Love a British accent. It gets me every time.
So I went into that date thinking, whatever happens, happens. Like, I don't need this to work. I really don't. And I saw him. I sat down. I didn't feel like, oh my God, this is the one. And this is also another story my husband loves me telling, because he wants to be the best first date ever. And I'm like, well, you actually were the best first date because you were my last first date ever.
Oh.
But not, there's a reason that it was a good thing that you weren't the best first date ever. We sat at that bar for 6 hours.
Wow.
I think I ended up drinking like a bottle and a half of wine, because that's just how much, we didn't want to leave. So we just I was like, okay, sure, I'll have another round. And, again, it was nothing crazy. I didn't like sneak off to the bathroom and text my friends like, got a good one. This is great. I was just enjoying talking to him. I was just enjoying being around him. And then at the end of the night, as we were wrapping up, he did something that no guy had ever done with me before. He said, "When can I see you again?" and actually set the next date before we walked out of the bar. And so I was like, okay, well, he's not going to ghost me. Well, at least I hope not at this point. At this point, it would be standing me up. But I knew, I had this feeling like this guy is actually going to back up the things that he says. I wouldn't kiss him. I gave him a hug goodbye, which is another thing he gives me a hard time for. But I also knew, I was like, I have tried so hard in the past. Like, I have tried to be what I think they want me to be, and I'm done. I'm just done with that. So if you don't like that I'm not going to kiss you on the first date, then you're not my person, and, go have a great life. So he contacted me the next morning. He was always attentive. And I just knew I wanted to see him again. But as we approached that third date, at this point, we were basically seeing each other every other day for that first week and a half, 2 weeks.
That's so cute.
And so we did the second date. I kissed him on the second date. I still made him work for it a little bit, but it was it was good. And then before the third date, he was doing everything right. And I just kept thinking, all I know when it comes to dating is heartbreak. All I know is pretty much the guy who I get interested in leaving. And then I spiral and feel bad about myself. And I'm not in a place right now where I feel like that's going to happen, but I also don't really want to take the risk. So I was thinking, is this really worth it? Like, is this guy actually going to be different? Do I really want to put myself out there again? And I wrestled with it, and he was being so sweet as I was on my way to meet him at this bar for our third date. And he was sending me the sweetest text, and I was like, ugh, dude, okay, calm down. Like, I don't even know if I really want to do this right now. But I got to the bar, and he got there right before me. And as I walk in, he was arranging bar stools in the perfect way so that we could talk to each other and have a conversation. And I just took one look at him, and I just knew I wanted to keep seeing him. So, we did not have the best first date ever, but we had a real first date, if that makes sense. And the entire time, I just knew. I didn't know I was going to marry him. I didn't know this was going to be the real thing. I just knew I wanted to keep talking to him. I wanted to see him again. That was it. And after probably 2-3 weeks, that's when I really started to say, okay, all right, I do think this guy could be special. That this could be. I don't think I was still really afraid to say the one, but I definitely started to develop those feelings. But it happened out of just a desire to keep being around him. I wanted him in my life. I didn't know how. I wanted him to be in my life, and here we are.
I feel like after you shared that story, I feel like he should coach men on how to court women, because he sounds like the dream. I have to be honest. Arranging bar stools, texting you straight away, locking in a second. I mean, he's the dream.
We've actually talked about that. He's like, I feel like I need to write a book. He's so sweet. I mean, my relationship with my husband and the way he treats me is everything I had always hoped a relationship would be, but I didn't actually believe existed. And so he looks at me and he says, I found my dream partner. I feel like I need to talk to men and help them realize and understand that they can do the same. So we have talked about that. And so who knows down the line what we might be able to kind of mesh together with this world. But he thinks about that too.
So would you say that you're happier now than when you were single?
Well, life is so different now. And here's where I'm really happy in the way my timeline worked out, that I did not get married in my 20s, that I didn't have kids then. I was reading a headline. I think I started skimming the article, but it was basically it was talking about a woman had written it and said, I had kids in my 20s like I was supposed to. Now I'm in my 40s. They've left home, and I don't know what to do with the rest of my life. Wow. And I was like, whoa, okay, that's a midlife crisis. When we talk about all of that, I got to spend my 20s doing whatever I wanted, having fun, making myself miserable for being single, which I wish I could remove that part.
Relatable.
But that aside, got to experience so many things, got to live all over the United States, got to travel, got to do things for myself that I didn't appreciate as much in the moment as I wish I had, and got married at 38. We went through a whole fertility and IVF journey starting when I was 40. I'm now pregnant at 41. I'll be 42 when I have. Thank you. I will be 42 when she's born. And I'm like, midlife crisis. I now am to this point in my life where I get to start all that stuff that I thought I would do in my 20s in terms of having the family and raising a child. And, in my 20s, I wanted to go out and have fun. I wanted to go make bad choices and, just
And I did that plenty of times.
More than I would like to count. But I got to do all that. And then I got to this point in my 30s where I was like, I don't want to do that so much anymore. And so finding my husband at that point when I did felt really good because the two of us are such homebodies now. And after having both done so many things up to this point independently in our lives that now we're really just ready to be able to, I don't want to go out anymore. Yes, I enjoy going out to dinner and in pre-COVID times, when we could do all of that safely and feel really good about it. But I don't need to do that anymore. I don't need to feel like I have to, especially in New York was the site like this, you had to put on a show every time you went out. And I loved it. I loved getting dressed up. I loved doing all that. I don't need to do that so much anymore. I'm fine curling up on the couch on a Friday night and not having any plans. And now we're going to be parents and get to go through that journey together. So I don't have to worry about a midlife crisis because I have so many awesome things that are ahead right now. And even if we weren't having a baby, this being able to start our life together at this point and being able to have plans and travel and buy a home together and just whatever it is that happens next, like it all feels very new and fresh, and I'm very thankful that this is the way things turned out for me. And this is just for me. Everybody's life is different. Everybody's path is different. And I want us all to be able to celebrate our own unique way. But I'm very grateful now that my life has gone the way it has. So I'm very, very happy now. I was also very happy in my 20s and in my early 30s when I was not beating myself up for being single. But I was happy in it. It was different. It was just a different lifestyle that I had. I definitely feel more supported now because I do have that partnership. But I also had a lot of support too when I was single that, again, I didn't always appreciate.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say though, because like listening to your story, your timeline is actually like my dream timeline. But it's such a shame that because we're brought up to think that we have to tick all these boxes that we can't actually enjoy it.
Yeah.
Because traveling around America, living in New York when you're single, that's the dream to me. And then meeting your partner once you've had this incredible career and you can finally focus on a family, that makes a lot of sense.
Doesn't it?
But yeah, unfortunately, like you did, we beat ourselves up for not having it all at the same time.
Yep. And all of these messages society sends us. And even now, I'm going to be a first-time mom at 42. I am perfectly healthy. This is a perfectly healthy pregnancy. Everything is great. But I have doctors freaking out because I'm so old. And it's like, but I'm not. Like my body's okay. I can do this. And already,
Isn't it called a geriatric pregnancy? Past 35?
Thankfully, no. I think they're trying to get rid of that, and no one has actually said it to me. But what they call it now is advanced maternal age.
Oh my!
Not much better.
So, do you think you would be happy today if you hadn't met him, though?
Yeah, I really would like to believe that I would. I have no idea where my life would have gone, what would have happened. But I do believe that I was finally getting to this place where I was good. I was feeling happy with who I was and what I had and the life that I could potentially create. I have no idea what it would have looked like if I had not met him. I have no idea if I would have been brave enough to leave TV when I did. I think at some point I would have. I don't know. It may have taken me a little bit longer, but I very much would like to believe that I would be finding ways to be happy. My brother has 3 kids now. I would be the best aunt ever. I mean, I'm still trying to be a good aunt, but I would have been so focused on being around them and having that be my kid experience. This is what I try and work with women on now, is helping them, because we don't know what the future holds. So how do we find the happiness that we want in the life that we've already created, while still hoping to find someone? I truly believe that anyone who wants to find someone, who wants to be in a loving, supportive relationship, it's going to happen. You will find that person. You will not be alone forever.
I agree.
The only problem is I can't tell you when. I just can't tell you when.
Can't predict the timeline, right?
So what do we do in the meantime? What do we do in the meantime to make ourselves happy and to give ourselves permission to be happy with what is actually going on around us?
So would you have considered settling had you not met your husband?
No, I don't. I would not have. I don't believe I would have once I got to that place where I was comfortable being single. While I'd never had a serious relationship, I had dated some guys in my late 20s and early 30s who were not good guys, who were not right for me, who did not treat me well at all. But I refused to see it. I wanted it to work so badly. And thank goodness those guys ghosted me, dumped me, whatever you want to say. They ended it. They made sure it didn't happen. And I was devastated at the time. But now, so thankful to all of them for being such jerks, because I wasn't ready. I wasn't at a point yet where I could really understand and realize what it is I wanted and what I deserved. And so I'm thankful. I worry that I would have settled back then if one of them had not, had decided, sure, let's do this. And that I would have gone along with it.
You'll do.
Yeah, it's fine. We'll make this work. But I believe that once I did finally start to embrace who I was and what I had to offer, that I would not have settled at that point. That was not an option. But younger me, I wanted to, even though I didn't think it was settling. I would realize now it's settling, but at the time, you don't know.
I totally get that. And I often think the same about guys who, like you said, have ghosted me or have just ended the situation abruptly. It's like I look back and I'm like, you actually did me the biggest favor. Thank you. I hated you at the time, but thank you now.
Yes. You broke my heart. I cried my eyes out, but thank you.
Exactly. So I listened to your incredibly heartfelt podcast episode about your IVF journey. And like I said, congratulations on your pregnancy.
Thank you.
For those who haven't listened to the ep, tell us about your journey. What have been some of the hardest obstacles you've had to overcome with your husband?
It's been a journey, that's for sure. My husband has a genetic condition that we had to have tested out, which they are able to do through the IVF process. They're able to actually test the genetic makeup of the embryo. So we started IVF thinking naively that we just had to test out my husband's condition, which there was a 50% chance that he would pass it on. And so I was like, oh, okay, fine. I mean, all we need is one embryo and we're set. So this is going to be no problem. I was so naive. I think a lot of people who go into IVF, I mean, you can't know until you go through it. So there's a lot of opportunities for naivete. But what we realized once we started was that my eggs I was already 40, but my eggs were behaving as if they were a little bit older. So we had a lot of challenges, not only with having to deal with his gene mutation that we needed to find, but also most of the embryos, all of the embryos were coming back with chromosomal abnormalities, which was because of my eggs. So you, as a woman, you go through this whole, it's my fault. This is not like I'm a woman. I'm supposed to have a baby. I'm supposed to be able to create life. What is wrong with me that I'm not? And that's a tough place to be at, especially for me. I had decided in my early 30s that I wanted to be a mom, but I didn't want to do it on my own. I didn't just want to be a mom. I wanted to have a family. So I wanted to go through that process with somebody. So if I did finally find my person, I would do this with him, but I didn't want to do it on my own. So here I had finally found my person. and now nothing's working. So we did 3 rounds over last year in 2020 during COVID. All of them failed. And we had, you get your genetic reports back about the embryos. And so I knew the gender of all of them. Every single one was a boy, which made it like I forced myself to look at that because I needed to remind myself that these were potential babies, potential humans. And just, it was hard. It was really, really hard to go through all of that. And we finished the 3rd round December of last year. That was not successful. And I thought that was it. I thought we were done. So you start grappling with these questions of how do you actually decide that you're done? Like what do you do to actually make that choice? How do you wrestle with that? And we were going back and forth because IVF is difficult. It is an emotional toll. It is a physical toll. I was basically on hormone injections for an entire year. I was gaining weight. I didn't feel like myself. It was pretty brutal. And so you wonder at that point, how much more can we put ourselves through? So we ended up deciding to do one more round. That would be it. Fingers crossed, we would see what happens. And we found out in February of this year that we had 1 embryo. Out of the 4 rounds, we finally had 1 embryo. And of course, all of them had been boys. And the one that broke through was a girl. Of course it was.
I love that.
So we were very lucky because once you have an embryo, that doesn't guarantee anything. So we were very lucky that the transfer was a success and that we found out in April that I'm actually pregnant and I'm due in December. So it's been wild. It's been an emotional roller coaster, to put it mildly. But here we are. In some ways, like I was just talking to somebody about this. I have 15 weeks left in my pregnancy. I'm 25 weeks right now. And it's crazy because I feel like I've been pregnant for a year and a half.
How has your husband handled the journey?
It's hard because women don't talk about this very much. We don't talk about infertility and pregnancy loss and IVF as often as I wish that we did. And I understand why, because when you're in it, it's hard and you don't necessarily want to talk about it and you're just trying to get through. But for as little as women talk about it, men talk about it even less. So there's, I could find some support systems. Social media is a great place to be able to find other women who are going through infertility, who know what you're talking about when you start going into all of the, technical medical terms. They know what it is you're talking about. And, my husband didn't have any of that. So, fortunately we have a very close relationship. And so, we were able to help each other get through.
Totally. And so what advice do you have for women who are about to embark on their own IVF journey?
Find support wherever you can. And also don't be afraid to cut off things that are not helping you and are not supporting you. I knew a couple of people who had gone through IVF, so I had that support, which I clung to, but then I also had friends and family who I absolutely love and who meant so well and who always wanted to know what was going on and wanted all of the updates, and I found myself absolutely exhausted trying to give them to them because I was just trying to get myself through it. So we did our 4th round actually in secret. We didn't tell anybody, even our moms didn't know, because I couldn't bring everybody else along on the journey with us anymore. We had to go it on our own. So do not be afraid to stop the things that aren't serving you. Also, I couldn't go to baby showers. I could not deal with pregnancy announcements. It was making me feel so bad. And so I stopped. I stopped following people who were pregnant, or I muted them. I did whatever I needed to do just to get through. And just being able to find support. The people who I felt honestly provided the most support to me through it were women, a couple of women who I've never even met. We connected over Instagram through infertility pages. And there is sometimes a really great comfort in being able to share some really intimate things that you're going through and some intimate fears that you have with a person who doesn't know you, who is a complete stranger, who can totally empathize and understand what you're going through. they also aren't emotionally invested the way, my mom is, whom I love, and I know she loves me. But it just, there's a pressure in sharing with my mom how I was feeling, which I didn't feel with these strangers, who feel anything but strangers now, even though we've never actually met. But yeah, I think those are my biggest pieces of advice. And then just I thought that if you did IVF, it would all work out. It might take a little bit, but it would all work out. Just there's no one way it can go. Anything is possible. And that's the hardest part. But I wish I had understood that a little bit more before I began.
So you offer one-on-one and group coaching to women. What are some of the things you explore in your one-on-one and group coaching?
Yeah, so my group coaching program, which will be coming up in the winter. I wanted to get through the pregnancy before we actually jumped back into that. But that coaching is specifically really for single women, and in a group atmosphere, which I think is really important to very much understand just how not alone you are, and how we so often are telling ourselves, oh, I'm the only one who's going through this. I'm the only one who's still single. I'm the only one who feels this way. And then just being able to be in this environment of knowing, having visual proof in front of you that you are not alone in feeling this way. And we really work through how to, and this is what I do in my one-on-one coaching as well. It's really about how to find the happiness and acceptance in the life that you currently have, in the life that you have already built, in the life that you are still building, in the future that you have control over, and how we let go of the way we thought life would go and instead embrace the life that we're actually living, because it's that actually that is what's making this life. It's the actually that is making it unique to you and is making it really special. And so how do we find ways to celebrate that and accept that? And so I work a lot with single women, but that it's really women who are facing anything in their life where they don't think they're where they're supposed to be, and finding ways to be able to cast that aside. There's none of this, okay, well, if we work together, I'm going to help you manifest your person. I'm going to help you. I'm going to give you the 6 steps that you need. Or in 6 weeks, you are going to find your person or be open to love. Because I don't know what's going to happen. None of us know what's going to happen. So my focus is the things that we can control, and is finding ways to reframe our perspective on the life that we have built, and really finding ways to appreciate it and actually enjoy it.
Which is so important. What are some of the most common pressures and difficulties you observe in your clients, though?
A lot of belief that the way things are right now is the way it's going to be forever, which is so easy. It's so easy to feel that way. And I certainly felt it. If I am single right now and I have not had success in dating, that's never going to change. And this idea that, I'm really I just need to feel bad because this isn't the life I wanted, but this is the way it is. And that's, poor me, this is terrible. That was the narrative I had all the time in my own head. But instead to take all of these things that we are fearing, I'm going to be alone for the rest of my life, and really trying to break down the fact in that versus the fear, and understanding that we have no idea if that's going to happen. And why couldn't the opposite be true? There's no more reason to tell us that we're going to be alone for the rest of our life than I'm going to find my person at some point.
Yet we always subscribe to the narrative that we're just going to die alone.
Exactly. Always.
He's never going to arrive.
Always. And there's there's no evidence out there that's actually indicating that that's more likely to happen than the opposite. So it's really finding ways to reframe that, because I think when you can finally start to feel okay about the future and what it could bring and what you have control over, that's what helps you really be able to focus in on what's happening in the present and actually be able to appreciate it and enjoy it.
Absolutely. And what about women who think there's something wrong with them that needs to be fixed because they haven't yet found their person or ever been in a relationship before, like yourself?
Yeah. Yeah. And that is what makes me so angry about the dating self-help world. This idea that you have to be fixed, that being single is a temporary phase on your way to being in a couple. And that if you aren't in that couple yet, then you're doing something wrong. And these messages are everywhere. Even women who are dating coaches or who are love experts and who are trying to help and work with single women, so many of the messages that they are sending are just telling you that you are broken and that's why you're single. And so no wonder we feel this way. No wonder we're telling ourselves when we are single that there is something that we're doing wrong. And I so reject that. I reject that so it makes me angry. It really does, because there's first of all, there's nothing that you are doing wrong. The only thing that has happened that has caused you to still be single is that you have not met your person yet. It hasn't happened. And if you are beating yourselves up because, oh, I'm terrible on first dates, or I did this wrong, I said that when I shouldn't have, or maybe I should have done this, or I shouldn't have done that, none of that will matter when it's the right person. It won't. And instead, we are being fed these ideas of, yeah, you're screwing it up somehow. You're either too picky, or you're not picky enough, or you aren't putting yourself out there, or, oh, you're going on way too many dates. Like, we can't win. All of these people trying to tell us what to do, like, we're never going to win. So why try to keep telling ourselves that there's one way to go? If we're not going to be able to please everybody, do what makes you happy and do what you need to do. Just know. And even if you don't truly believe it yet, just start trying to tell yourself that you are not broken. There is absolutely nothing wrong with you. Your timing just hasn't happened yet. You just have, like, I met my husband at 35 and a half because I got lucky. I got lucky that I was in the frame of mind that I was in, that he was in the frame of mind he was in, that we happened to connect on a dating website, and then in person we hit it off. That was so much luck.
You're a dating website success. That gives me hope. I'm sure it gives a lot of women hope.
I know, because there's not that many out. I mean, there are, but there also are way more horror stories and bad things that women go through. But no, we are a success from a dating website, but we got lucky. I got lucky. There's nothing about me that makes me smarter, more capable, more worthy of love than a person who has not met their person and who is single. I'm not more special than anyone. It just, I met him already. It just hasn't happened yet. And that's the only reason you're single. It is, I swear, I promise.
Totally. And what about women who subscribe to a different version of happily ever after? Because some women don't want marriage or kids, or, they don't feel like they need a relationship to be happy.
Yes.
Or they want multiple relationships.
Exactly. There is nothing wrong with that. Like, we have got to normalize this idea that there is no one way to be happy. There is no one happily ever after. We are not living in a Disney fairy tale. There are so many different ways to be happy. And I think one of the things from my podcast and having conversations with different women, one thing that has really stuck out, I've had a couple of women who have gone through divorces, who've talked about how, they did everything they were supposed to do. They got married, they had kids, but then they got divorced. And as soon as they were divorced, all of a sudden the narrative they started hearing again was, oh, don't worry, you'll meet somebody. Oh, it's going to be fine. You'll find somebody. It will work out. And they're like, what if I don't want it to? Like, what?
Stop hitting me over something I don't even want.
Yes. Why does it always have to end with me being with somebody? Because that's not the only way. And also, you can find your person, be blissfully happy and not want kids. That's also okay. There is no one way. And so the more that we can really, truly talk about our lives and our experiences and share our stories, the more we can normalize this idea that there is no normal, that there's no one way we're supposed to go, and that happily ever after. Also, happily ever after indicates that there's an end point. Like, just because you do get married and have kids, life still goes on. Like, you're not done yet. So, that just stop believing that there's this. And if society could please stop perpetuating this one idea, that would be really, really helpful. We're not there
please
yet.
And thank
you. But, there's nothing wrong with you for being a woman who doesn't have kids, whether it's by choice or not. There's nothing wrong with you for being single. There's nothing wrong with you for being divorced. There's nothing wrong with you for being divorced twice, or, whatever your story is.
Or for starting a business in your 40s, or buying a house in your 50s, like any of those things, for deciding to spend your life traveling and having, no base and no responsibility. Like,
Exactly. Yeah. That's the beauty of it. You get to decide what you want to do. And I wish everybody could just shut their mouth and try and stop sharing their opinions, because yours is the only one that matters.
So many opinions out there. Honestly, it's hard to keep up. And also just the shame around being a mother and the way you want to bring up your kids.
Right? So even when a woman is finally doing what society says she's supposed to do, and she's supposed to get married and have kids, well, now she's had her kid. She's doing it wrong. Yeah. It's just so many ways to shame women. So anti-shaming is what the Life Actually company is all about.
I love that. So tell me about your anti-dating guide. Did I say it right?
Yeah, well, you did. That falls into this whole idea of, you need to be fixed. There's one way that you're doing this wrong. And I got so tired of all of these. It's 2021, and we still have people trying to tell you that there are dating rules that you have to follow. And
oh my gosh, honestly, I have to interject there and just say that is absolute rubbish, because I've been on like 1,000 dates. I feel like I'm a great first date because I can literally chat to a wall. But honestly, chemistry and compatibility, you can't buy that. It's like true love is the one thing you can't purchase in life,
Exactly.
One of the few things. So like these rules around dating, I call bullshit on them.
Yeah. No, they totally are. And what it really comes down to, if an idea about rules speaks to you and you feel like that's how you want to date, cool. What are the rules unique to you? Like what matters to you? Let's set our own unique rules, because there is no one size fits all. I can tell you my story. I can get into great detail, tell you exactly how everything worked. That is not a roadmap for you to find your own happiness. Maybe some of the things I did would work for you. Most likely, some of them totally wouldn't, because we're all unique. So I got so tired of these dating guides, because not only are rules so stupid, but it continues to perpetuate this idea that if you're not following them, you're doing something wrong. Or if you're still single, well, it's because you're not doing this. And that's crap. So my anti-dating guide, which I have for free on my website, is basically an empowerment guide. It's a way to help you feel good about dating on your terms and in the way you want to date. I am never going to tell you what to do. I might help listen to you and share back what I'm hearing you say, so that you can start really figuring out what it is that matters the most to you when it comes to dating. What are the things that you want to focus on? If you don't believe you ever want to be the first person to reach out, cool, don't reach out. If that does not speak to you, which it never spoke to me.
I hate when people say, you should text him. It's like, but if he was interested in me, like, I know that he would text me. So, it's like,
if that's what works for you and if that's what you want to do, awesome. And if you are the type of person who's like, I do want to text, go ahead and text. If it doesn't work out, it's not because you sent that text. It's because it's not the right person for you.
Exactly.
If it was the right person.
It's not about the text, people.
Exactly. It is not about the text. It is not about what date you kiss on, what date you sleep together.
Right?
It's not about any
There's
of that.
There's no formula to love. Like, let's be real.
Nope. So that's why it's an anti-dating guide.
Amazing. But I'm curious, how did you define success before you were 30, and how has that changed for you now? knowing everything that you know, being on this long journey through life?
That's a great question. To me, success prior to 30 was how much money I made and what my title was in my career.
Wow. I love the honesty, by the way. I love that. Yeah.
That was success. And that's what I was fighting for. I mean, I wanted to get married and have all that, but that to me was success. And so the older I've gotten, the more experience that I have had, I want to be happy and I want to be doing something that fills me up, that makes me feel like I have a purpose and that I am able to connect with other people. So,
I love that.
I'll be perfectly honest. I left TV. I left a very great salary. I have yet to reach that salary on my own. So Laura, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, would have been like, oh my God, what did you do? What did you do? You are not making as much money.
Abort mission.
You used to have a title that people were like, oh, wow, cool. You're on TV. What have you done? And I can honestly say that I have never been happier in who I am and in what I am doing. And I realized that the stress of that TV world was so bad for my mental health. And now that that's gone and that I don't have that hovering over me, there's so much freedom there.
Yeah.
And the ability to, work with women in a small group or work with women one-on-one, and I finish a session and I feel like I connected with somebody. I feel like I in one small way helped them feel like they're not alone. That feels successful to me. That feels like way more important than
any title or
broadcasting from the Super Bowl in New York City. Like none of that matters.
That's very
really
cool though, Laura.
Anymore.
That is very cool. That's cool that you did that. Let's just be real for a second. That's cool. But I hear you.
It was also freezing cold and I couldn't feel my toes and it was not glamorous. But
there you go. The reality is always very different to the fantasy.
Yes. And I also didn't even get to see the end of the game because I had to go get in front of the camera. So, not quite what it seems.
So do you think women can have it all? And what does that even look like for you now?
I had a woman on my podcast a few months ago, Beate Chalette, and her whole idea is that women can have it all, just not necessarily at the same time.
Yeah.
And that made a lot of sense to me. The idea of having it all, once again, kind of conforms to this one-size-fits-all idea of what it means to have it all. And I think that everyone is so different. You could have the career, you could get married, you could have kids, and you could decide, I don't want the career anymore. I want to be with the kids. Or you could decide, I want the career and I want to figure out how to balance it. Or you could decide I'm never having kids and I'm just going to worry about, balancing my time between my fur babies and my job. And, we're doing ourselves such a disservice in trying to talk to women about how to have it all. I want to be happy, as I said before, but I also want to feel fulfilled. And I want to feel like I am taking care of myself and my needs. Like last year when we were going through the IVF and everything was just really tough, I took a break for about 4 or 5 months from my business, from social media, from everything, because I had to step away. I had to give myself time to grieve everything that I was going through, to really process what was happening. And so, a lot of the time during that period, I was telling myself I was a failure because I wasn't just focusing on work and I wasn't just throwing myself into all of that, but I knew I couldn't. So I stepped back from it. And there's no shame in that. There's no like, oh, well, you aren't having it all because you decided to take a break. And I'm looking at it with my pregnancy now and trying to figure out what the future is going to hold and what it's going to look like once I am a mom and once this baby is here. And I don't know. And just to let that be. To let it be okay.
Embrace the unknown, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, which we're so bad at doing.
And maybe I will have the baby and, after however much time, I'll be like, yep, okay, I have to get back to work. I have to jump right in. And maybe I'll say, I need some more time. I have absolutely no idea, but I'm not going to hold myself to an idea of having it all and trying to force myself to behave in the way that I might think I should, or that society might think I should, and not holding myself to these expectations.
I so love that, and I really hope that the listeners today hear that. Like, I feel like women need to hear that more often. But knowing that life very rarely goes to plan, if you could change anything about your timeline, would you?
No, I wouldn't change anything about the timeline. I wish I could go back and tell myself to just calm down about being single and actually find ways to enjoy it. But I would not. I really would not.
I guess that leads into my next question, because SAT is all about creating the manual for the modern woman. And I'm curious,
Yes.
What is one piece of advice you wish you knew earlier?
That you cannot control everything. Because I had control over, to an extent, over my career, because I had some control over, where I lived and things like that. I think I always felt like I could, if I just worked a little bit harder, I could control love and I could control relationships and I could make it happen. And so if it hadn't happened, then I was doing something wrong. So I wish that younger Laura understood a little bit more the difference between the things we can control and the things that we can't control, and was able to put more of her focus into the things that she could control.
Yeah.
And then also just to know it's going to be okay. I don't know what it's going to look like, but you're going to be okay.
Absolutely. Thank you, Laura, so much for being a guest on the Single at 30 podcast. It has been such a treat speaking with you today.
Oh, Nicole, thank you so much for having me. I have loved this, and I absolutely love what you are doing. And anytime I can connect with other like-minded women who are out here talking about the realities of being single, I would be here all day, whatever you need.
So many realities. So many. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this Single at 30 episode, How to Own Your Timeline and Free Yourself from Societal Expectations, with the charming and inspiring Laura Behnke. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review and hit follow and subscribe. If you have any questions, feedback, or even an episode idea, DM me on Instagram at single_at_30, or join the Single at 30 closed Facebook group to become part of the community where, together with other like-minded modern women, we publicly air the uncomfortable and the unspoken. As always, no topic is taboo as we search for answers to the questions most people are too ashamed to ask. This is Single at 30, the manual for the modern woman that we are writing together.